Stopping the war in 24 hours is impossible.
But I get along well with him, and I get along very well with Putin, and they know it's no games. I have this thing settled in 24 hours. I would get a settlement in 24 hours. I will end that war in one day. It'll take 24 hours.
With the only difference being that Biden was ready to help Ukraine until the last Ukrainian, however many Ukrainians that would take, 1 year, 2, 3, 10, Biden was prepared to keep helping them for that long. A teaspoon an hour, but still willing.
As long as it takes to support Ukraine, as long as it takes, for as long as it takes.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Lately, it has become fashionable, only the laziest dog hasn't done it, to throw a stone at Trump. Trump is incompetent. Trump sold himself to Putin. Trump has bad advisors. Trump is terrible. And today I want to spend a little bit of your time to discuss with you, as objectively as possible, whether this is really so, whether Trump is truly the worst president, whether he really sold himself to Putin, whether he is completely spineless, and so on. You cannot accuse me of loving Trump. I have stated my attitude toward Trump many times. Trump does not understand the constitutional structure of America. Trump is fueling the war by appeasing the aggressor. Trump is absolutely incompetent when it comes to European relations. He simply does not have that educational background. So, I want to start with the idea that probably the most objective way to evaluate a politician is to determine how well he fulfilled or failed to fulfill his campaign promises. That is, no matter how much we may dislike his program, if someone elected him, they elected him so that he would carry out certain promised actions, and if he did them, then from at least this logical standpoint, fulfilling what he promised means that, for someone, he probably did something right. For comparison, let's look at what Biden promised. Without even leaving his basement, in 2020, Biden was elected president. Trump, it is true, still disputes this, but that is beside the point. And so I asked artificial intelligence, so that there would be no, so to speak, bias on my part, to write for me, based on its artificial intelligence understanding, what Biden's key promises were in order of priority. First, to defeat COVID-19. No, he did not defeat it. Moreover, in an absolutely unclear, I would even say incomprehensible way. From COVID in 2020, the last year of Trump, 377,000 people died. In 2021, the first year of Biden, 415,000 died. That is, under Biden, despite the fact that there were vaccines, more people died than under Trump. I believe it is absurd to make promises like, I will be able to defeat COVID.
What I would say is I'm going to shut down the virus, not the country. I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm going to shut down the virus. I'm going to shut down the virus. I'm going to shut down the virus. I'll shut down the virus, not the economy.
But since he did make that promise, he should have kept it. And here somehow, without vaccines, Trump was doing better than Biden with vaccines. Why, God only knows. I am sure this has nothing to do with Biden personally, but the promise itself was absurd from the outset. Next, to create millions of jobs. And here I must state absolutely clearly that Biden did create up to 15 million jobs, as they write, the largest number of jobs ever created. At the same time, he said that he was going to rebuild the economy through green technologies and through increasing manufacturing, real manufacturing in America. This was important. No, it was not done. Out of those 15 million jobs, Biden created only 750,000 jobs in industrial manufacturing. About 1 million were created in the public sector, and the rest were created mainly in healthcare. That is, what happened was the following. Biden borrowed trillions of dollars, printed trillions of dollars, and created government jobs. That's what it's called. Well, one has to say that he did fulfill the promise, but how he fulfilled it is, of course, something to be judged separately. Next, to raise taxes on corporations and the wealthy, to roll back and repeal the tax cuts introduced by Trump.
And the wealthiest 1% of Americans have just begun to pay their fair share. Just their fair share.
He absolutely did not do it. He did not even try. To raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, no, he did not do it. The federal minimum wage remains exactly as it was, $7.25 since 2009. That is twice as low. To expand affordable health care, expand the Obamacare program, reduce the cost of insurance policies and medications. No, he did not do it. Moreover, during his tenure, the cost of health care rose significantly. And why wouldn't it rise if they hired a lot of new people there? New people want money. To reduce the cost of education and make community college free, to reduce students' debt burden, he tried. Colleges did not become free. The Supreme Court prohibited him from forgiving student debt, ruling it unconstitutional. He does not have those powers. He did not do it. To fight climate change, to achieve net zero emissions by 50. That is, he makes a promise that he would fulfill in 30 years. But here, there is nothing even to comment on. Police and judicial reform, to promote DEI justice measures, to limit the use of force, that is for the police, to support community safety programs. He did it. He did it. At least in the federal government, that's what we are talking about. To forbid the police from engaging in proactive policing. Yes, this was done. As a result, which means he did fulfill this, a massive crime wave began in the country. Something Trump is now trying to fight. Immigration reform to end the harsh zero-tolerance policy, which in effect means opening the borders, and to protect undocumented immigrants who came here when they were young, to simplify the path to legalization, and so on. This he did. He opened the borders and let in, how many millions we do not know exactly, undocumented immigrants. This promise he did make, and to restore international alliances, strengthen NATO, return U.S. leadership in the world, and improve relations with European allies. He did that, and so, in terms of fulfilled promises, again, I am not commenting on the quality of those promises, about 1/3, maybe 40%. Now let's look at what Trump promised us. Again, whether you like it or not, we will simply go down the list. Once again, the list was not compiled by me, it was compiled by artificial intelligence. To close the borders and stop illegal immigration, restore control, resume construction of the wall, and reduce the number of illegal immigrants to zero. He did it within the first 200 days. In those 200 days, even less. He did all of that. To carry out the largest deportation in U.S. history, the mass expulsion of immigrants, illegal immigrants, this is in progress. And what is interesting is that his draconian measures frightened immigrants so much that they are not so much being deported as deporting themselves. By the way, he is offering some money for them to deport themselves. So there will not be mass deportations in the classic sense. But it is already being reported that in America, 1,200,000 working illegal immigrants have left the country. To fight inflation, reduce prices, and make life affordable again for the middle class, he did it. Right now, inflation is around 2.5%. At its peak during his term, it was 2.7. At its peak under Biden, it was 2.9.1. The desired inflation rate is 2.2, so overall we are moving toward that goal. To make the United States an energy superpower, to export oil and gas, to become self-sufficient in oil, to lower oil prices. He did it, he did it. To bring manufacturing back to the United States, to limit auto outsourcing, to turn the country into a leading industrial power. Well, he is trying as best he can. We will talk a bit later about what may come of this, but he is definitely trying. To cut taxes for the middle class, including eliminating taxes on tips. He did it, he has already done it. To dismantle the drug cartels, reduce crime, and strengthen the fight against criminal gangs and drug trafficking. The drug trade has been radically reduced. He introduced a kind of curfew, well, not exactly a curfew, but federal control over Washington, and crime fell fivefold. To make the army strong again, to invest in the military, to create national missile defense systems like the Iron Dome. Well, during his tenure, the largest sums were invested in the military, around $1 trillion. And yes, development of that Iron Dome type system is underway. That is, it is working. and to preserve the dollar as the world's reserve currency, strengthen its status, and protect the U.S. financial system. Here, well, he definitely did not do it, or rather, how should I put it, he preserved it. As of today, he has preserved it, formally, yes. But what happens next? We will talk about that, but that is what he promised. Now, what I consider in the format of good, bad, and ugly, that is, the good, the bad, and the ugly, my personal subjective assessment of Trump. I will list 10 points now, and then we will discuss them in detail. To stop illegal migration, he stopped it. To stop DEI and wokeness, he stopped it. To stop discrimination based on freedom of speech and political persecution, he stopped it. To stop antisemitism and support Israel, he did it. To stop the seizure of power by the deep state, he is doing it, and to a large extent, has already done it. To stop the Green New Deal and lower oil prices, he did it. This is my list of what I like about Trump. To stop the inflation of the Biden era, he did it. To stop U.S. aid and reduce government spending, U.S. aid he stopped. Spending, well, so-so, we will talk about that later. Healthcare reform and MAHA. Make America Healthy Again, producing impressive results, tax cuts and deregulation. So, 10 points on which I would, without any doubt, vote for Trump again, knowing everything I know about him now. That is, I have nothing to apologize to my audience for. I have nothing to apologize for, nothing to repent for. I understand that if I urged people to vote for someone and he did not meet my expectations, then, as an honest person and blogger, I would have to say, yes, guys, I misled you. I urged you to vote for Trump, and he turned out to be a completely different person from what I expected. But that is not how the question stands. That is not the situation. I voted for Trump, and on the main key reasons for which I voted for Trump, he not only meets them, but in many ways exceeded my expectations. The alternative would have been worse, significantly worse, and would have alternatively destroyed America. So forgive me, please, but Trump is the president of America. I am a citizen of America, not Ukraine, and therefore I fully share what has already become a worn-out phrase, America first. That is, I judge and evaluate the results of Trump's actions by what he has done for America. Note that artificial intelligence did not even include among Trump's top 10 promises his promises regarding Ukraine or any foreign policy activity whatsoever. Now let's go point by point through all 10 of these things that I believe Trump fully justified my hopes for. America, like Western Europe, is falling under an invasion of barbarians. I will not shy away from that word. That is, the level of civilizational development differs from country to country. This does not mean that people should be despised, destroyed, or killed. We are simply stating the fact that somewhere there exists a very high level of civilizational development, such as in Western Europe, where women have all rights, where democracy exists, human rights exist, and there is a less perfect or less developed level of civilization, where women can be beaten to death with stones for being raped if they fail to find 4 witnesses, as punishment for infidelity. I may certainly seem like a chauvinist to you, but I believe that beating a woman to death with stones for having been raped is a sign of an underdeveloped civilization, just as cannibalism, torture, and other such practices are signs of an underdeveloped civilization. So there are developed civilizations and less developed ones, using the Romans' term barbarians, and these barbarians, without any war at all, simply cross the borders of civilized countries illegally and seize that civilization. These civilizations, the civilizations of Western Europe, are collapsing and have practically already collapsed. In Western Europe, the number of non-European people, not in terms of skin color, I'm talking about people who do not share European values, who have entered these countries and have not assimilated or integrated, has exceeded a critical mass, and Western Europe is on the path to self-liquidation. This is their decision. This is their choice. I will certainly feel very sad and sorry if Western Europe, do not confuse it with Eastern Europe, comes to the end of its days, and the remaining population will be looking for somewhere to flee. But they will have to flee somewhere. Therefore, it is extremely important to preserve the bastion of Western civilization, to preserve the United States of America. The pace at which, under Biden, we were letting in illegal immigrants, millions per year, and in the record year, in my view, it was around 5 million, was leading us down the same path. Trump, during his tenure, stopped this and, provoking outrage and horror, reversed this process, and many illegal immigrants are leaving the United States and returning to their countries of origin. Crossing the border is possible and necessary. Immigration, I believe, is a beneficial thing. I myself am an immigrant. But the difference between me personally as an immigrant and an illegal immigrant is the difference between a person who walked into a supermarket to buy shaving cream, stood in line at the register and paid for the cream, and someone who walked in, slipped the cream into his pocket, assuming the camera did not see him, and quietly walked out without paying. That is the entire difference. Both obtained the cream, the same item from the same supermarket, but through completely different processes. Next, the very fact that Trump stopped illegal immigration and is trying to reverse it, and is expelling or deporting millions from the country, is already enough for me to state again and again that I would vote for Trump again and again if the elections were tomorrow, because Kamala Harris would definitely not do this, and America would be racing toward the very same abyss toward which Western Europe has been heading. And we need to preserve America, not even for America's own sake, although that would also be fine, but for the sake of all those Europeans who, in 20 or 30 years, will have to flee somewhere, will have to immigrate somewhere, just as white people from South Africa are now looking for places to escape to. Trump, by the way, another one of his achievements, announced an accelerated migration process for these Afro-Americans. Yes, they are Afro-Americans. They came to America from Africa. They are white as freshly fallen snow, but nevertheless they are Afro-Americans. They need to flee because back home they are being slaughtered, tortured, and physically exterminated. This is exactly what could happen to Europe. To Western Europe, I emphasize again, not Eastern Europe. And for that, we need to preserve America. Second, Trump stopped the policy of diversity, equity, and inclusion. He stopped it very correctly and very creatively, using the very anti-discrimination laws that had been adopted by the Democrats themselves. That is, it is absolutely obvious that when a Chinese child is not admitted to the University of California, Berkeley because he is Chinese, that is discrimination. When a Mexican child or a black child is admitted in his place, that is also discrimination. All of America during the Obama-Biden era was permeated by complex systems of discriminatory pressure. In hiring, in being hired by a government institution, in receiving services from a government institution, in admission to universities, both private and public, skin color mattered. When skin color plays any role in your career, in one direction or another, that is called racism. And Trump stopped this new racism, and that is wonderful. He made us, well, at least gave us a chance, to become a united nation again, because before that we were being split along racial, gender, and other lines. Speaking of gender, in the same vein, Trump put an end to this whole wokeness madness. That is, when the governor of California started saying that maybe it is wrong when boys compete against girls, when boys were once again, imagine this as one of Trump's achievements, forbidden to use the same bathrooms as girls in American schools, in this case California schools. These are major achievements by Trump. Now my daughters can go to the bathroom without being afraid that a boy will walk in and pee there, because that boy happens to identify as a girl that day. It sounds incredibly stupid and ridiculous, but this is exactly the nightmare we were facing personally. This is not some abstract war in Ukraine for me. This is the very real nightmare that awaited my children in my America, in my country. Next, during the Biden era, thousands of cases of castration flourished, both physical and chemical, of children, underage children, who were effectively sentenced by the American state after these state-funded castration procedures, simply because a disturbed child said that he thought he was a girl. These children were thereby condemned to a very high lifetime risk of suicide. And as that murderer who killed 2 children and wounded 17 others recently said, he wrote in his diary, "They brainwashed me. I am suffering. Where is your God?" Yes, that says it all. This too was banned. And just for that alone, if Trump had done nothing else except this second point, I would already vote for him again and again. But he did much more. Freedom of speech. You could not say the word vaccine on YouTube. You could not contradict global warming. You could not talk about the ineffectiveness of fighting COVID-19 with masks and so on. Your channel would be shut down. Officially, there were so-called community guidelines under which you were silenced, stripped of your platform, and it did not matter whether you were a famous blogger or an unknown one. I was shocked when, during the COVID-19 era, by the way, still during Trump's first term, I reposted an article, a so-called article by 5 leading scientists in the field of COVID-19, stating that everything being done to fight COVID-19 at the time, even then under Trump, was wrong, and that a different approach was needed. They were criticizing from the heights of their scientific authority Fauci's position. My Facebook account was blocked. I do not remember for 1 week or for 2. Facebook blocked my account and warned me, do it again and we will shut you down completely. This stopped. We now have freedom of speech and political persecution has stopped. That is, I did an interview with a close acquaintance of mine, Maria Rutenberg, who was a political activist. Not a major one, not a leader of any party, just a political activist. She gave interviews, made donations, attended protests, went to rallies, met with Republican politicians. They subjected her to debanking. She described what that looked like. They simply deprived her of the ability to use banking services. And she has her own business, a large business. She lives off it, earns her income from it. That is, they deprived her of the ability to earn a living. Just like that, all of this stopped. And for this alone, I would vote for Trump again. Next. Trump stopped the wave of anti-Semitism that erupted in America under Biden after the attack on Israel by barbarians, those very barbarians. And universities, very awkwardly groaning, resisting, whining, were forced to take measures to limit discrimination against Jewish students. It got to the point where people of Jewish ethnicity, children of Jewish ethnicity, or simply those who looked Jewish, that is, it was not even clear whether they were religious Jews or not, just if you looked Jewish. It was dangerous for you on campus. You could be beaten. Children complained, and universities did absolutely nothing. Statistically, Jews are the most persecuted ethnic group. No, not Muslims, not black people, not gays. No, the most persecuted group across all possible categories in America is Jews. And under Trump, real efforts to fight anti-Semitism began. And Trump, even if not fully, and even if not in the way I would like, nevertheless does provide support to Israel, something Biden had no intention of doing. Next point. Power in America was seized by the security apparatus, that is, by the Democratic deep state. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Central Intelligence Agency, a huge number of other law enforcement and security agencies, public radio, foreign policy departments such as the State Department and others, including USAID, as well as healthcare, environmental agencies. All of these institutions were fully controlled by partisan activists of the Democratic Party. A very interesting, self-accelerating machine emerged. In order to receive an appointment in one of these departments, you had to demonstrate not only ideological, but also practical loyalty to the Democratic Party. In other words, our state became a one-party state, and that is extremely dangerous. This can lead, or has already led, to coups of power. The point is that half the country, Republicans, pay taxes to a state that works against them. That is, half the country finances a government that works against that very half. The state must be politically neutral. That is the only normal requirement. During political competition, the state must not use the so-called state resource. I do not know whether Trump's votes were literally stolen in 2020 in the way Trump describes it, stuffing mailboxes, sending fake ballots by mail. I do not know. Trump is not conducting an investigation. I have no proof, but I am absolutely convinced that this state resource tilted the political scales in Biden's favor. If the state had not been for Biden, against Trump, Trump would have been reelected. In that sense, a seizure of power did occur, in the sense that National Public Radio, and even more so USAID, operated according to a very interesting scheme. USAID was created to provide foreign aid to foreign states, political movements, and to promote democracy around the world. Wonderful. That is, this is the American Agency for International Development. The machine works as follows. A shell company is created. It receives some grant. Part of that money goes to fighting hunger in Kenya. Part of the money goes to another shell company. Part goes to a third shell company. That third company transfers part of the money back to the first shell company, and part of the money, as a result of the most complex manipulations, ends up not in someone's pocket, no, but in the collection of political funds for the election of the Democratic Party. This is something that requires a separate investigation, but this is what was happening. That is, the state placed a very fat finger on the scales of political processes, and this has now been stopped. Officials are running, fleeing Trump's program. They are fleeing on their own. They are being fired. There is simply a merciless purge. I did not expect this from Trump. He did not do this in his first term. And in this regard, because of the purge Trump has carried out within the state apparatus, I would vote for Trump again and again for this alone. It is dangerous for our state when the entire government, all power, essentially de facto, belongs to one party in a two-party system. His is what Trump is finishing off. They are scattering with wild screams, howling, running. They are scared. They feel terrible, wonderful. I watch with pleasure how they are literally writhing, like in an exorcism, how they are seized by convulsions, how they scream on CNN and MSNBC. I watch this with great pleasure. Beyond that, the same thing was happening in the courts. Judges appointed by federal judges, not local judges elected by the local population, but federal judges, district judges, and judges who were appointed by Obama and Biden. They are partisan activists. There is no objective adjudication, no objective decision-making. There are partisan decisions serving partisan goals. Trump is also trying, though not as successfully, to uproot this as well. That is, to create a more or less fair judiciary. No, it will never be pro-Republican. That is not the question. But at least fair, at least some attempt at a fair court. Next, point 9. This alone would be enough for me to elect Trump again and again. Even if there were nothing else, just this alone, I would vote for Trump again. And that is the appointment of Robert Kennedy, who, despite all the hysteria and screaming, turned out to be a very effective, very balanced, and very decisive reformer of the American healthcare system. These processes are, of course, very long-term. You cannot immediately show results like, it was this percentage, now it is that percentage. This takes years. But judging by what Kennedy is doing now, he is trying to make the American nation healthier. The American nation is the sickest nation in the world. We will not be able to defend you. We will not be able to pay you money. We will not be able to make weapons for you as you ask in Ukraine if everyone here in America is sick. 40% of adults of working age have at least one chronic illness or more. No, 40% of adults of non-working age, when a person could be working, have one or more chronic illnesses. America has become a sick nation. We were sold out along with our health care. The state that took this on does absolutely nothing. Well, not nothing, but certainly not what it should be doing, at least not what it promised. And now Robert Kennedy, with Trump's support, is completely uprooting this process. Trump lowered oil prices in concrete terms. Under Biden, oil prices averaged $80 per barrel over the entire Biden term. Under Trump's first term, it was $55. Under Trump now, as of today, the average daily price is $67. That is not $55, but it is also not $80. Why is that? Because inflation has occurred. Inflation, rising prices for labor and for the goods used in drilling, pushes everything up like a tide that lifts all ships. That is how inflation works. Prices will never go down. For prices to go down, people do not understand this, there would have to be deflation. Once prices rise, they rise. If under Biden there was inflation of 9% even in just 1 month, that means everything rose in price by 9% forever and will never go back down unless we see deflation, when prices actually fall. That is why prices rose under Biden cumulatively by around 20%, if not more. Accordingly, we will never again see oil at $55. The new optimal price is around $65 to $67, but that is not $80. You might say, what's the difference? $30 either way. The difference is enormous because oil has a cost of production. Oil has a production cost, which is probably around $30, maybe $35 in Russia. I don't know exactly, but roughly those numbers. So if the price is 55 or 65, oil companies make around 35 in profit. But if the price is 80, the profit is around 50. Accordingly, the difference between oil at 60 and oil at 80 is roughly double the profitability. That means Putin has about half as much money to wage this war, which leads to the fact that Russia is running out of money, running out of people, and running out of resources. The money has not run out yet. This is a multi-year process. But there is less money, and that is good. This is far more than anyone has ever done for Ukraine, reducing the volume of Putin's oil revenues. For some reason, all the Krutikins and all the Milovs never tell you this. Moreover, Andrei Illarionov also never mentions this when he talks about how Trump betrayed Ukraine. For some reason, none of them remember that the price of oil fell. The price of oil fell. Next, I drive both an electric car and a gasoline car. Electricity in California is so expensive that I pay around 35 to 40 cents per kilowatt hour. So the electric car, strangely enough, does not save me much money. You may laugh, but that's California. In other states, it's different. Gasoline prices have fallen by about $1.50 just in California, and in other states, even more. That is, we are simply getting a direct financial benefit from Trump being president. Life has become cheaper for us. Life has become cheaper for me. Why should I vote for a presidential candidate who makes my life more expensive? Explain that logic to me. I don't understand it. In the end, we always vote with our wallets. Trump made our lives cheaper. Next, Trump lowered taxes. Trump made the tax reforms he introduced in his first term permanent. And Trump introduced a huge amount of deregulation. Doing business in America is becoming profitable again. Trump tirelessly pulls investment into America. Here $1 billion, there $1 trillion, there $500 billion. By various estimates, foreign investment in America has increased by several $1 trillion. Trump names a figure of around $5 trillion, an inflated figure in Trump's style. But the fact that investments are flowing not out of America, but into America is beyond doubt. The level of capital investment from foreign individuals and organizations into America has grown significantly, very significantly. And this is important. It's like in Ukraine. They want to get rid of foreign capital investment. Ukraine wants handouts, which the state then distributes, stealing a significant portion along the way. But foreign capital investment, Ukraine doesn't like that. In America, we believe the opposite, that it is beneficial when people invest money here. So I have listed 10 points, my personal point of view, on which, if the elections were held now, I would vote for Trump again, without hesitation, without thinking twice, because the alternative was not DeSantis. The alternative was Kamala Harris. What is Kamala Harris? As a resident of San Francisco, I know this very well. A woman who literally sucked her way to her political ambitions. This is not gossip. Her lover wrote about it himself in a book about their relationship. A woman who made a brilliant career by that method, who could not formulate a single coherent sentence without drifting off into horse-laughing nonsense. God be with her. Yes, Trump is not Cicero either, far from Cicero. But this woman is charged with radical left wokeness. As a senator, she voted to the left of Bernie Sanders. That is, she was the most radically left senator in the United States. There was no one further left. This would have destroyed America. This government, this power, Kamala Harris, would not have been some neutral or vague ice cream-loving figure like Biden. This would have been a battering ram, a wrecking ball, the thing you use to knock down houses. It would have demolished the United States. So neither then nor now have I had any doubts. In the matchup, Trump versus Harris, no, not Trump versus DeSantis, but Trump versus Harris, there is absolutely no shame for me in whom to vote for. I am not going to repent, apologize, or say that I was mistaken, that I'm sorry I supported the wrong candidate, nothing of the sort. As of today, and maybe this will change later, Trump is far from ideal, and he has a large number of shortcomings, which, unlike many Trump supporters, I am not afraid to name. This throws my viewers into complete confusion. How can Lyubomirsky just spend 30 minutes praising Trump and then start explaining how Trump is bad? The fact that you don't understand this is very strange to me. What I am doing is called, as far as I understand, though I could be wrong 300 times, objective journalism. I call good things good and bad things bad, and it seems to me that any person should think exactly this way. Do not make an idol for yourself. That is the second commandment in the Russian version. Trump is far from ideal. Trump is far from an idol. And he has a huge number of flaws that not only can, but must be talked about. Why? Because if we all talk about them, if we create a certain informational field, there is a chance that Trump may correct these flaws. In any case, the things Trump does that I dislike, I do not carry them on my conscience. At the same time, unlike the previously mentioned Andrei Nikolaevich, who, as I remember perfectly well, gave 2 interviews explaining why Putin was afraid of Trump and wanted Kamala Harris, hinting that if we wanted Putin's defeat, we should elect Trump, he now says the exact opposite. That is normal. That is natural. But in that process, it would have been appropriate to apologize. If I were in his situation, I would have apologized. My position then and now is absolutely unchanged. Choosing between Trump and DeSantis, DeSantis was, in my view and still is, a much better candidate than Trump, and Trump should not have been elected. I called Trump unelectable, but it never occurred to me that the Democratic Party would lose its mind to such an extent as to nominate an even more unelectable Kamala Harris. Trump, I am deeply convinced, would not have been elected if instead of Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party had come to its senses because it was lying unconscious from senile Biden and had nominated and brought to power Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen Whitmer is not much better than Kamala Harris, but she is a charming woman. She could have charmed America and appointed Josh Shapiro as her vice president. She, as the governor of one swing state, and Josh Shapiro, as the governor of another swing state, would have won those elections against Trump in a landslide. So we got lucky. The Democrats made a huge tactical mistake. They nominated the most radical, the least charismatic, the most repulsive candidate possible. As a result, out of 2 unelectable candidates, Trump won. Everything would have been exactly the opposite if Trump had not been there and if Kamala Harris had not been there. Further, Trump's popularity still remains very low. Trump is not charismatic. He irritates the majority. There are people who are delighted with Trump, as with any figure, but most people dislike him. Trump is not charismatic, and his popularity is underwater. That is, most people dislike him rather than like him. At the same time, what is interesting is that most of his actions are above water. People like what Trump does, but they do not like Trump himself. With Obama, it was exactly the opposite. People liked Obama, but they did not like his policies. And so Trump boasts that he stopped or prevented 6 wars. The Israel-Iran war, the war or conflict between Congo and Rwanda, the conflict or war between Thailand and Cambodia, the India-Pakistan conflict, the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, and Egypt and Ethiopia. For a long time, Democrats have been saying that this is not true, that in India, the Indians themselves denied that Trump influenced their decision. I will not even waste your time analyzing whether this is so or not. What matters is that there is a clearly proclaimed vector of foreign policy, peace. While I am the night watchman of the planet, there should be peace. That kind of policy, at least, is clearly formulated and proclaimed. And I absolutely do not care if the motivation behind Trump's behavior is his desire to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. That prize was probably created precisely to encourage people to fight for peace. Trump fights for peace as best he can, unfortunately very poorly, which brings us to Ukraine. Did Trump sell himself to Putin? No. Trump fights for peace in the way he knows how. Let me tell you how Trump would behave if he actually wanted Ukraine's defeat. Because after listening to many analysts, one gets the impression that Trump is fighting specifically for Ukraine's defeat. I think that is intellectually dishonest and inconsistent, not to see the obvious things that Trump does, continues to do, and also what he does not do. What does Trump not do? He does not publish compromising material on Zelensky, Yermak, Mindich, and the whole team. If Trump really wanted to send Ukraine into a political tailspin, the Mindich tapes, which are currently in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, would have been leaked, transactions would have been leaked, or a criminal case would have been opened over the embezzlement of American resources by the office of the President of Ukraine, thereby creating a political vacuum. Trump has not done this and is not doing this, although he perfectly knows and fully understands the level of corruption in Zelensky's office. Further, Trump could have used this corruption, which we all know perfectly well, as a pretext to stop any aid to Ukraine, and he would have had excellent excuses. Everything sent there gets stolen anyway, and politically he would not have suffered any serious damage in the United States. He would have explained to American taxpayers that everything there is being stolen. Just recently, Mark Semyonovich Solonin posted an excellent piece. He suddenly decided to take up the fight against corruption. About the so-called flamingo that was allegedly launched at Crimea. There was no flamingo. In Ukraine, a scandal continues, one in which a state private shell company, set up by Mindich, received millions of dollars from the Ukrainian government and massively inflated both its production volumes and its procurement prices. The same monopolistic scheme. Mindich's friend receives money from the government, steals part of it, and produces some non-competitive product with the rest. So the main attempt was to divert a growing news scandal in Ukraine away from Mindich's company. That is essentially why we were told the story about the flamingo. But the flamingo never arrived, despite official statements claiming that the first strike had been carried out. What flew was much slower and much weaker. Something did arrive, but not a flamingo. Some other bird, maybe a sparrow, maybe a bullfinch, maybe a crow, but not a flamingo. All of this could have been very easily publicized by Trump. That the flamingo never took off, that sparrows and crows are flying instead, and that on this basis the United States is cutting off support, that is not happening. Bloggers claim that Trump has suspended or halted arms deliveries. This is not true. It is simply not true. It is a lie. Trump continues supplying weapons to Ukraine. Twice, when weapons were not delivered, Ukraine screamed, shouted, stomped its feet, and we all knew about it. Ukraine screams and stomps when this happens. Right now, it is not screaming, because arms deliveries from the United States are continuing. Yes, they are minimal drip-fed. I criticized their scale back then, and I am ready to criticize them now. But what was delivered under Biden is being delivered now as well. The difference is that, unlike Biden, Trump does not publicize these deliveries. That creates the illusion that before there were massive shipments and now there are none. That is false. Right now, deliveries are ongoing, not only under the Here and Now Presidential Drawdown Authority, but also from funds paid for by the American people 3 years ago. That equipment is now finally being produced and shipped to Ukraine. And whenever Trump pauses some type of weapons delivery, we immediately hear about it from Ukraine. If Ukraine is not screaming that America is delivering nothing, that itself confirms that America is delivering, just quietly. The United States is not shouting about it. Trump could have done far more if his goal were to collapse Ukraine's defense capability and hand this war to Putin. But he does not do that. Trump, in his own way, wants to achieve peace. I categorically disagree with his method, but I partially agree with his goal. He wants to end the war, but he wants to end it through Ukraine's defeat. And here I am not reasoning from the standpoint of Ukraine. I am reasoning as an American citizen, from the standpoint of American interests. That would be a massive blow, not only to America's prestige, but also to its position in future military conflicts. Let me repeat this clearly so it sinks in. Trump clumsily wants to achieve peace for the sake of his damn Nobel Prize at the expense of American interests. Right now, Trump needs to support Ukraine at least at the same level as Biden did. Trump wants to stop that. Ironically, Trump actually has a very strong position. He is forcing Europe to buy American weapons. The arms market is open, and he could remain in that position indefinitely. Instead, for completely non-pragmatic reasons, Trump wants to stop the war in Ukraine at any cost. What he is doing, meeting Putin in Alaska, staging all these farces with Zelensky's visits and entourages in Washington, reduces the military and political prestige of the United States. And here I am categorically dissatisfied with Trump. This falls into the bad category. And now, in the ugly category, we have tariff wars. In the ugly category, we have the growth of the national debt, which Trump himself has confirmed he has no intention of fighting. That is, not Ukraine. Ukraine is in the bad category. But if we talk about probabilistic considerations, we may well fall into a depression or a recession during Trump's term. Whether it is a depression or a recession does not really matter. What matters is that we have not had a recession since 2008, the longest economic expansion if we do not count COVID, which is a separate story. Since 2008, there has been continuous economic growth. Forgive me, but 17 years have passed since 2008. People now occupying mid-level and senior management positions have never seen what a crisis looks like. They have never experienced one. So a recession will come. But that recession will be Trump's recession because he initiated these radical changes in the economy. And from my point of view, his interference in the economy, this playing with tariffs, is a serious mistake. Instead of that, he almost achieved zero tariffs. Perfect, ideal zero tariffs. You sell whatever you want in our country. We do not harass you. In return, we sell whatever we want in your country. And in fact, most European countries were ready for that. That would have been the most sensible policy. But Trump does not want that. Trump wants to protect the American market, that is, force American consumers to buy more expensive goods. In other words, impose tariff taxes on us. And God with the taxes, but my greatest fear is something else. I very much hope that under Trump this does not happen, that regardless of whether his policy leads to a recession or not, it will allow his political opponents to label any recession during his term as Trump's recession. It will be extremely difficult to shake that off, and then all the achievements I listed, of which there are many, will go down the drain. So, to conclude, Trump is without a doubt a very contradictory figure. Personally, I find him unpleasant as a person. I am not going to marry off my daughters to him. That is my personal attitude toward him, and it has nothing to do with the analysis. I am trying to be as objective as possible. And from the point of view of the analysis I have laid out, I would vote for Trump if the elections were tomorrow. If on the other side of the scale there were Kamala Harris, again and again, I have nothing to apologize to you for. Then and now, I am making what I believe is the only correct choice.